And when Trump came in, I could not believe it. The military, I had talked to a lot of officers, to take one example very quickly, and they said, we'll never get 50,000 recruits. This cohort is too fat. They're in gangs. They're tattooed. We have to compete with the private sector, the unemployment rate. And then all of a sudden, Trump said, no, you were DEI and you demonized the rural white working class and the vaccinate, all, and then he does it. Same thing on the border. You can't do it. You have to have comprehensive immigration. No, he does it. And same thing with NATO. You'll never get them to get 2. The idea of 5% is crazy. They hate you. He does it. So I don't know where he gets that confidence and energy, but it doesn't affect him when people tell him you're crazy or no, or you won't be able to do it. It's amazing.
All right, guys, we have made it through the work week. Last week was a short one. This one, we got a lot done this week. I mean, we got so much happening this week. The tariff announcements, the cabinet meeting, big win for president on SCOTUS. So much happened. It's unbelievable. And I'm hoping, you know what, with all that, maybe the president could just make it a quiet weekend. I don't know. Does that happen? Never. But anyway, Victor Davis Hanson is here today. I'm just going to tell you this. He is obviously an amazing guest. I love having him on the show. And he's just a busy guy. But I promised you once before, we had some scheduling conflicts. We had to move it around. He is here today, and he never disappoints, as you know. So I'm excited to sit down with him and get his take on everything that's happened this week. Before I do that, another great guy. You guys know about this. If you've been watching the show, and we're up, getting close to the 500th episode, by the way. From the beginning, my buddy Leo Grillo has been a huge supporter of the show. He is the founder of Delta Rescue. Now, Delta started with a dog that he named Delta and found abandoned on the side of the road, Doberman, and literally gave that dog the care and the support that it needed to get it back. And Leo Grillo was like, I can do more. And that became the beginning and the origins of Delta Rescue. And it is now the world's largest no-kill sanctuary. Sanctuary, not shelter. This is not a place that you go to adopt dogs. And Leo and I, when we first got to know each other, I said, I've rescued 3 dogs. And he's like, Sean, that's not what I do. He takes in dogs, cats, horses, you name it, abandoned, malnutritioned, abused, neglected. This is a place where animals go to get the care and the attention and the support they need for life. They're not looking to farm them out or adopt them or whatever. And it's amazing what he does. It is just so many of the great things that Leo Grillo has done. And the thing about Delta Rescue is that there are no USAID grants, no political pro subscriptions. This is all supported by people like me and you. I made a personal donation to Delta Rescue because I am so impressed with what Leo Grillo has done. And I would ask you to go to deltarescue.org, look at the great videos, the work that they've done, how big this thing has grown, and consider a personal contribution to Delta Rescue. When you go there, you'll also see this estate planning tab at the top of the website. Click on that, think about it, pray on it. If you can help Leo make this an enduring mission, maybe you have an old 401k or a stock that you're trying to figure out what to do. You can probably get some kind of tax benefit in the short term. Talk to your tax professional about how to do that. But this is the kind of stuff that'll allow Leo to keep Delta Rescue going for decades. So please go to deltarescue.org and consider a contribution. By the way, if you are grilling, cooking this weekend, something that I've added to all of the food that the omelets, fresh fruit, vegetables, steaks on the grill is a firecracker. It is this firecracker salt. And if you go to firecracker.farm, so again, remember when you do internet stuff, you go .com, .org, .edu. This is cool now because it's firecracker.farm. So it sounds kind of interesting, but that's what you're supposed to do. They've got all these unique URLs. It's a hot salt. And it is so cool. It's a family-run business, and they've been making this small batch hot salt, Ghost, Reaper, and Scorpion peppers, the 3 kings, as they like to call it. But this adds a kick to whatever you're cooking that is so cool. And like I said, I've now, my thing in the morning, I do omelets, eggs. That's what I added to on the grill. I added to steaks. And a lot of people have found so much. It unlocks so much flavor, especially on vegetables. If you're a vegetable person or want to add a kick to it, trust me, it's going to be unbelievable. It was sold out before Father's Day. They've got it restocked. It's in small batches. You get this grinder that comes with it that's really cool. I mean, this stuff, trust me when I tell you, you've got to add it to your repertoire in the kitchen right now. Go to firecracker.farm. firecracker.farm and use code Spicer for a discount just for our watchers and listeners of this. It tastes incredible. It's beautifully made and it supports a great American company. And trust me, it'll add something to your culinary experience that you can't get anywhere else. Firecracker.farm. Without further delay, though, let me bring in one of my favorite guests, Victor Davis Hanson. Hey, Victor, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Earlier this week, the president had this cabinet meeting, and I was thinking about it after the fact. He had gone through every one of the department heads, secretaries, and they each reflected on what they had been doing and working on and accomplished. And I thought about the totality of it. And I was like, at the end of a 4-year term, you would expect each one of these guys to come back with the report that they had. And yet here we are 6 months in, and I was like, in every area, they each have significant progress to report, which I thought to myself, you're the historian. This really is, to me, a monumental term for this president. I don't mean to sound like some kind of sycophant, but each department went through and said, Mr. President, here's what we've accomplished: energy prices, defense, foreign policy. And I was impressed with each one of them.
Yeah, I think he's given more press conferences, 6, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Biden, he's done 66% of the press conferences that Biden did in 4 years. I think I couldn't imagine that in the first term because, you had John Bolton or Rex Tillerson or people like that. And it's a reflection this time that he deliberately selected cabinet people who were force multipliers of his MAGA agenda. So what the media gets angry is they all praise Trump, but actually he's kind of thrown it out there. I want you guys to exceed or enhance what I do. And so they all come up with all their own ideas or initiatives or policies that they think would even make the MAGA experiment work even better. So I've never seen a cabinet, and he was criticized for that because, as you know, in reaction to his wilderness years in the first term, the criterion this time, he asked, are you loyal? Will you stand by me? Will you reflect the agenda? Or are you going to be a John Bolton or a John Kelly or somebody? And I think that shows up in these cabinet meetings. He lets them go, and they have all sorts of good ideas.
Is there somebody that you, as a historian, look at and are impressed with, either in terms of what they've accomplished or maybe even just the expectations that they have met or exceeded from where they were at the beginning of the term?
Well, Churchill came in on May 10th of 1940, and that was the day they invaded France. And he had no control over what happened the next 4 to 5 weeks where they lost. But there was people there, Halifax, and a lot of people said, you cannot be the only one. Russians are on the side of Germany. Americans are isolationists. There's all of what is now the EU is occupied or pro-German. So you got to cut a deal. And he said, no, I'm not going to do it. He cannot, whatever you say about Hitler, he cannot get to North America. He cannot get to India, and we have the British Empire. And for a year and a half, he stood alone, but he was completely defiant. And everybody thought they would fold. Our ambassador, Joe Kennedy, said he's done for. He had no friends. They said he had been disgraced in World War I. It was he had wilderness years like Trump did. And when he came in, everything changed. All of a sudden, people said, you know what, we're going to fight on the beaches. And when Trump came in, I could not believe it. The military, I had talked to a lot of officers, to take one example very quickly, and they said, we'll never get 50,000 recruits. This cohort is too fat. They're in gangs. They're tattooed. We have to compete with the private sector, the unemployment rate. And then all of a sudden, Trump said, no, you were DEI and you demonized the rural white working class and the vaccinate, and then he does it. Same thing on the border. You can't do it. You have to have comprehensive immigration. No, he does it. And same thing with NATO. You'll never get them to get 2. The idea of 5% is crazy. They hate you. He does it. So I don't know where he gets that confidence and energy, but it doesn't affect him when people tell him you're crazy or no, or you won't be able to do it. It's amazing.
They judge, and it's funny you bring that up because I've said to people all along, everybody likes to focus on Trump's process. he said this word, he used a profane word, he called this individual out. And the point that I've said to folks is, look at the result. Do you really care? I want a government that is more effective, more efficient, getting results. I want taxes cut. I want a conservative agenda implemented. I want men out of women's sports. And if you stop and sit back, I want a secure border, right? And I sit back and go, okay, he got it. So are you concerned about the tactics that he used to get it? Or are you actually interested in the results? Because I feel like for the last several decades, we've been really good at electing politicians who can give great speeches and then a bunch of excuses as to why we didn't get what we were told we were going to get. And Trump here is delivering.
Yeah, I think that applies the way he campaigned and the way he's governed. I guess people finally got tired of losing nobly, and they want to win ugly if they have to. And I'm less bothered by it than I was before, because one of the indirect or maybe the deliberate results of it is it really brings out and shows what the left is like. And nobody has been more effective in exhibiting what the left values in the universities, in the media, in the administrative state. And he's really turned over that rock. I mean, for 20 years, I'd always said to people, if you know what exactly is going on in the universities, they defy the Supreme Court, they're racist, they're anti-Semitic, they gouge the federal government with 50% surcharges, they have racially segregated dorms, they have 95% leftists, they do not respect the First Amendment, they attack speakers. Nobody cared when we said that about and he comes in and he says they're going to cut a deal. And they said, no, this is Harvard, this is Yale, they're a lump. But they're going to cut a deal because he knew what they were doing is embarrassing to them, and he was going to tell the public, and he was going to win that. Same thing with men in female sports. So he's got an uncanny ability to know what's a 30, 70, 80, 20 issue. And when he finds that issue, he just plows ahead because he's assumes that the American people are all going to be on his side, and he ignores the media or the left or what they say. He's a transactionalist. He looks at foreign policy. They say he's an interventionist or he's an isolated. He's a transactionalist, a Jacksonian. He looks at every little decision in a cost to benefit analysis, risk versus benefit. Is this in the interest of the United States? And is it crucial to the interest of the United States? And if it is, I'm going to take the risk. If it isn't, I'm not. So it's in the interest of the United States to take out that nuclear facility. It is not in the interest of the United States to get into a tit-for-tat long war with Iran in the Middle East. And they don't understand that. They don't understand that about it.
I want to get back to Iran in a second because I really want to get your take on this. But you brought up the universities, and obviously this is your wheelhouse. You've been at Stanford for quite a while and are really familiar with this. Do you think that, like, if you look in 10 years, I mean, you talked about how long that you rang the alarm. Do you think that these guys are just placating him for the next 4 years, or do we really have an opportunity to reshape higher education and the bias, the anti-Semitism, the political correctness, the DEI agenda that has become so essential and baked into higher education? Is this a placate him for 4 years, or is this a reshaping of it?
No, it's a reshaping because they know what they've been doing. They never say to him, we don't have anti-Semitism. They have liberal professors at Stanford and Harvard that have internal studies. We had one. It was 900 pages damning the university for being anti-Semitic. They know they have separate graduations by race. Stanford, to take that example, knows that they've let in 9% white males who make up a demographic of 35% of the nation for the last 4 years. They know that they chased Judge Duncan out of the Stanford Law School and said that they hoped his daughter would be raped, and they hijacked his lecture, they being an administrator. So across the board, they know they charge 55% of federal grants. So they know what they're doing. And then more importantly, Trump is a business person. So when they all brag about 30 billion endowment, 50 billion, he looks at the budget very carefully and he says, well, first of all, those are targeted monies. They don't go into the general fund. These are what donors want. So they'll fund a basketball court or ethnic studies, but you can't take that. So a lot of that endowment is not fluid. Number two, about 20% of their budget is federal grants. So I have control over that if they violate the Bill of Rights or civil rights legislation. And then he looks at it and he says, alumni giving is down. And we count on that for 50% of their annual budget. And then he says, why don't they have to pay tax on their endowment income? So the big, beautiful bill, I mean, they were lucky. That was 21% in the Senate, and they settled on 8%. But just what Trump did on the grants, to take one example, by limiting the surcharges to 15% and to tax the endowment at 8%, that's going to cost Stanford University $500 million. $500 million. And that's not debatable. That's already going to happen. And it's legal to happen. And so they know that. And so they're going to fold. They're going to go to Donald Trump and say, we will abide by the Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action. They already have. And I think they're all going to fold. Because if they don't, they're going to fold real quickly for two reasons. One, they have no choice. And two, there's employers now and the business community that's going to Harvard, Yale, and Stanford and said, you know what? You have not had the LSAT or the SAT for 4 years. You have been letting in people on the basis of race, gender, sexual, that have not met your own prior standards. We see them. For the last 4 years, we've been hiring these people with these so-called Harvard degrees or Princeton or Columbia or Stanford. They don't compute, they don't analyze, they don't write well, and we don't want it. We'd rather have a guy from SMU or Texas A&M, and that's happening. So they're losing. And so a lot of these presidents are saying, and I know this for a fact, they're saying, we kind of like the satanic, demonic Trump, because then we go to our left-wing faculty and we say, oh man, this horrible person is making us do this. We're going to get rid of affirmative action. We're going to have to use merit again. Oh my God, we can't gouge. We're going to have to lay off the whole DEI corporate institution on campus. So they use him as the bogeyman. So they're going to fold. And he knows.
That's brilliant. It's like he gets to be the foil for them. They're like, hey, I didn't do it. Trump made me do it.
Trump made him do it. That's what they're saying.
There was a provision in the big, beautiful bill that didn't get a lot of attention that I want your take on, because I think this is brilliant. They capped the amount of federal student loans that you can borrow for graduate school to $20,500 a year with a total limit of $100,000. And then they capped medical or dental school at $50,000 a year with a limit of $200,000. Now, immediately what happened is everyone went nuts and said, well, wait a second. The median cost of attending medical school is like $300,000. Now, my take on this was what Trump was trying to do was bend the cost curve. These schools, these institutions know if I lend Victor Davis Hanson $200,000, they're going to charge $200,000 because why not? And then next year they'll index it and say, now we'll lend $210,000, and then they'll increase that because they'll always take what they can get. By him bending the cost curve down, right? If they know that most students are going to need these loans, then they need to probably cut costs, get rid of stupid majors like gender studies or intersectional study. I mean, whatever's going to get you $18,000 a year in the professional world afterwards. I don't think this got the attention it deserved. I wonder if you share my view that this is definitely going to have an impact on how these higher.
It already
has.
It already has, because they know that in the last 20 years they have increased the rate of tuition at twice the rate of inflation. Wall Street Journal 2 years ago said, I don't know if it's accurate, there were 15,000 administrative staffers at Stanford and 16,000 students, one for every, basically.
Oh my gosh.
And that was a product of a guaranteed student loan federal grant subsidy from the federal government. And it's kind of like tariffs. Everybody said if he has tariffs on Japan or Europe or China, one of two things: we're going to get in a trade war, we're going to get inflation, or these countries will jack up their prices and we won't be able to afford it. Well, then he said they have such a great profit margin. They're taking us to the cleaners. They can pay the tariff and still go down from a 20% profit margin to a 10%. And they will, because they have to be in this consumer, huge market. And it's the same thing with these universities. They will scream and yell, but they have such a big profit margin that they will lay people off, mostly DI, and cut back, and they will still do well. And then he's looking at antitrust, because if you look at a graduate PhD in the humanities to take the area I know, and you look at what it costs at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, it's all the same. Same thing with undergraduate tuition. They just rig the market. And he's going to go in there and look and say, you know what? We want you guys to compete. We want you to cut costs against that guy and that guy. And so he's trying to bring competition in too. It's a monopoly. And we'll see. I think he's going to be successful, though.
You know, it's funny because we talk about this and you brought up tariffs, and it got me thinking, all of these things, we throw around the world, and I say we, meaning mostly the media and the left, talk about so-called experts, especially in the, whether it's tariffs, as you just brought up, or all these economic folks that say, if Trump does this, it's going to result in economic chaos. The markets are going to go nuts. I checked my stockbroker account, my brokerage account the other day. It's doing pretty well. All of these predictions about when he institutes tariffs, the job market is going to fall. In fact, last month it was record high. Inflation is going to go through the roof. No, it's not. And I guess the question I have for you, as somebody who has studied this over history, is that when do we stop calling these people experts? Because they're wrong.
Yeah, I just wrote a thing about it last week, the death of expertise. I think a lot of it has to do with the university and this idea of credentialing people. But I'm not picking on the Wall Street Journal. I like the Wall Street Journal. But I went back and looked at what they said from March 1st to May 1st. They said
this year.
This year. They said that we were going to get either inflation or stagflation. We said when we had that historic drop, they said it will not recover by the end of the year. They said we were going to have a recession. They said we were going to have high unemployment. They said there were going to be essential goods that would never make their way into the U.S. market. Everything they said was wrong. It was like the 51 intelligence authorities that swore that the laptop was Russian disinformation project. It's like the 100 economists that told us that Build Back Better and all the green initiatives and the Inflation Reduction Act would not cause inflation. 9% happened the next year. So I guess the problem is that many of these people are in the university, or most of them. And I can tell you that they're the most one-sided, least rounded people in the world. They go right into undergraduate, then they go right into graduate school, then they go right into university. They've never run a business. So if I were to ask somebody about the economy, I'd ask a building contractor or a real estate salesman or an oil man, but I would not ask a PhD in economics. And the same thing about intelligence. I wouldn't get a PhD in diplomacy or anything. And it's even true of our generals. They told us that Donald Trump had wrecked NATO in the first. They hated him. He was like Colossus at the last summit. He just strode over people like they were pygmies, and they were all calling it daddy, and we're going to pay 5%. Mr. Trump. And then I read a New York Times interview with the head of NATO, and they kept kind of bait him. Aren't you fawning on him? Do you really believe he's going to? Oh, yes. We love Trump. He's made us stronger than ever. We have plans now to repel Putin. Well, Trump won't come. If we meet the 5%, he will be there in a nanosecond. We trust him. And so it's amazing. It really is how discredited these people are.
I started laughing when you gave your example because I was thinking back to college, and I joke with people. I got a D in economics, and one of my frustrations and I had done very well in like high school economics, so I thought I'd do fine in college. And we had this one professor who I, at the time, didn't fully appreciate how leftist he was. And we would do these examples, and he would say, well, okay, so here's the model, and we're going to hold housing constant. And I would say, you can't. I mean, how can you hold housing constant if more people are moving into an area? The prices are going to go up. And he goes, well, for this example, and I go, but isn't that the fundamental problem? Like, that's not a real example then, because if more people move into an area, then the demand for housing will go up, the cost for housing will go up, the wages will go up, and he was just like, no, we have to hold, or whatever. He had all these things where we'd hold something constant, and in my mind, because again, I grew up the son of a salesman. And so, you want more money, you sell more things, you keep your costs low. I mean, like, my dad was always teaching me about how you make money. You sell to rich people who've got the money. You figure out your cost of, whether it's cookies or greeting cards. And I kept thinking to myself, these guys who are supposed to be teaching us, that are the so-called professors and experts, had no real understanding of what it was to manufacture something, to sell a good or a service, to figure out what it took to make a profit. And when you're running around explaining to people that you can hold things constant in an economic model, that doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. I don't want to mention any names, but I was at a university retreat where there were at least 8 blue chip economists, colleagues, and they were all telling the audience that we were headed for disaster because of tariffs. And I had to come on the next session. They got very angry because I said, if trade deficits are so good, because they were telling me that trade deficits are better than trade surpluses, because the surplus will hurt the other side because they're subsidized. It makes us leaner and meaner, all this crazy stuff. I said, if trade deficits are so good, why did nobody want them except us? Why do the Chinese not want them? Why do the Japanese not want them? Why do they want surpluses? And what is so good about getting billions of dollars of foreign exchange to China? And what do they do with the foreign exchange? They go on the international market and they buy high-tech parts for their military, or they bring in expertise, they hire people to go over there. But what is good about that? And, they have no answers. And the best thing that ever happened to me was I farmed full time for 5 years after graduate school. I had a PhD in classical languages, but just in writing books about the ancient world and the agrarian economy, I learned more going back and farming at my home than I did in some ways in academia, because that's a problem. You didn't used to be that way 70, 80 years ago. There were professors that were very involved in the World War II effort. President of Harvard helped develop, for good or evil, I think for good, napalm. Most of the people who were working on the Manhattan Project were patriotic people from universities. And they were out in the body politic. But the more we rarefied it, and it got more theoretical, and it got more esoteric, and it got more lucrative, less teaching, more research, more money, the more out of touch they became. And now they kind of discredited themselves. And so
I think that the thing that's fascinating to me on the tariff front is, again, I get asked all the time, he moved the deadline. And I'm like, okay, who cares? Like, what is it that you actually want? What is the result you're trying to achieve? And I think that President Trump has highlighted the unfairness and the imbalance of all of these trading partners. Why are we a low tariff, low non-tariff barrier market to access? And yet when we go to trade with India, no one has a problem. I mean, you brought up NATO earlier. Article 5 was a two-way street. You pay 2% of your GDP to your own national defense. We'll all have each other's back. And for decades, we all said, don't worry about it. You guys don't have to do that. You use your money for roads and bridges or whatever you want. The U.S. will cover the tab. And the same thing with tariffs. I can't believe that Trump, like, more people aren't on board with Trump on the tariff front, because he's arguing a mere issue of fairness. If you want access to our market, just let us have almost close to the same. He said the other day in the cabinet meeting, I'm not trying to hurt these guys. I just want more fairness. And no one seems to, it's like, I don't understand how the Democratic Party, that's supposed to be for the working men and women, don't think that that's not a good idea and aren't on board.
Well, they might if it weren't Trump. Whatever Trump does, they're against. But already we've seen that the tariff revenue has doubled what we thought. It's Scott Bessent the other day said it's scheduled to be $300 billion that's a third of $1 trillion that no one had counted on. And the other thing about it is they know what they're doing. Mexico knows how it's getting $171 billion surplus. Canada knows that they got a $63 billion. So when Trump starts all this, it's not like he's picking on somebody. And they know what they're doing. They know that they have asymmetrical tariffs. They know that in some cases, like Canada, they're subsidized. It pays 1.37% on defense. Mexico knows what it's doing with $63 billion in remittances. And he knows that. So when he starts yelling and screaming, everybody thinks he's crude and why is he doing this? But then the news filters out, and in the next ensuing days and weeks, people start to get the details, and then they get on board. And that's what all of these people are going to cut a deal eventually. It's just a question of how. It's the art of the deal. He goes into a room, he screams. I read all of those books when I wrote a book about Trump, and he just goes into a room, he tells you to scream and yell, act like you're crazy, demand 80% advantage, and then hours later you get whittled down, you walk out, you come back in, and when you get to that magic 55, 53% advantage, you cut a deal, and then you never, ever attack your opponent. You say you were taken by him, he was gracious, you want to do business, and that's all he's doing.
Yeah,
I can't, and they can't see that. And
it's the funny part. To your thing, it's in books. He wrote it down.
He wrote it down.
He gave you the playbook, and everyone goes, how does he just do this? And it's like he literally has 12 books. Yeah, and he tells you what he's doing.
And every one
they're
of them.
Constantly amazed. They're like, I can't believe he did this. And the books are 15, 20, 30, 40 years old.
I know. And he said, well, he's taco, he's chicken. No, he walks out of a room and he play acts, and then he walks back in.
Yes. And that's the thing. I want 80%, David, and you go, Victor, and you go, no, I'll give you 50%. And I started at 0. And guess what? Victor just cut me a deal at 50%. You think it's great because you went down from 80, but I went from 0 to 50. I win. And no one sees that. It's like,
and no one sees what he says. Like, oh, he's Putin's puppet. Oh, he's Kim Jong-un's puppet. Xi takes it. No, that's what he said he would do. He says in the books, you never attack the person that you're trying to get a advantage over, because you A, will have to do business with him in the future, and B, you don't want to humiliate him or he'll come back and renege. You have to praise how smart he was and how he took you. But he always says that about Xi. Oh man, I am on good terms with Xi. He's smart. He's clever. I'm not going to make fun of Putin. I'm not going to call him he's a smart guy, and they don't understand what he's doing.
Yeah. The other area that he's had tremendous success on, and it's, you're out there in California, is this border stuff, which I find amazing. It just shows the difference in leadership. And I think what's fascinating to me is, okay, he won. He's secured the border. He showed us what the difference in leadership can do. But the Democrats attacking openly these ICE agents and going after, it's like, I have never seen anything so politically stupid in my life. Watching these Democrats double down on siding with criminals and against federal agents who are doing their job.
Yeah, it's a losing issue, but it's reflective. They don't have the House, they don't have the Senate, they don't have the White House, they don't have the Supreme Court. They're on 20% of the issues, or 30% at most, and they're impotent. And unlike last time, this time Trump is saying, I'm not going to address the symptoms alone of the progressive project. I'm going after the sources. So they would say traditionally, well, we don't have any power temporarily in the legislative or executive or judicial branch, but we control PBS, NPR, the universities, foundations, the media. And now all of a sudden they're looking at this and they're saying, oh my God, he's going after PBS. He's going after the universities. He's going after foundations. He's taxing. He's going after the source of our institutional power, how we exercise influence. He's going to ruin the progressive project. And they go crazy and they look out. So they don't know what to do. So Hakeem Jeffries carries a bat. That's stupid. Al Green screams and yells and shakes a cane. They have these smutty videos with the S word and the F word. And now they've turned it over to the internet mob and the street killers. I mean, these guys are killers. These people are trying to assassinate, but they're not much worse than the internet mob, who sides with, I guess they were gleeful about the children dying in Texas because they thought it proved that these people deserved what they got because they were supposedly MAGA, red state, climate denialists or Doge people. And so that Democratic Party has no infrastructure. There's no influence anymore. Just 5 years ago, when they saw that Democratic field in 2020, that Buttigieg and had won, I think he won Iowa and they had lost, Biden had lost New Hampshire to Bernie, and they said, Elizabeth Warren, Buttigieg, Bernie, Castro Betters, Cook, they got to get out of here. We've got to get old Joe Biden from Scranton, play him up, use him as a waxen effigy, but we'll get killed. That's all over now. They would never do that again. The AOC, Jasmine Crockett, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie, they run that party now.
I just can't believe
it to the ground.
I don't think I ever pictured a day when you would see them openly, this attack on the ICE facility down in McAllen, Texas. There was another one in Texas, and yet not a single Democrat was asked nor came out publicly and denounced it. It's not one.
No, I didn't think they would, because after the death of George Floyd, there was a constant riot every night for June, July, August, September, October. In June, Kamala Harris said this isn't going to stop, nor should it stop. It's going to go on to election. They burned a precinct, police. They burned a courthouse. They burned a historic church. They killed 35 people. 1,500 officers were injured. $2 to $3 billion in damage. They arrested 14,000. They let them all go. That was like 1% or 2%. So in the left's mind, the Democratic establishment, they said, that really hurt Trump, because we had him in a lose-lose situation. If he called out federal troops, our blue state mayors and governors would refuse them and call him Hitler. Our military would even the military call him Hitler. But if he doesn't do it, the chaos of 4 or 5 months shows you that he loses control. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But they came away from that thinking that was one of the reasons that Donald Trump lost the election. And in their mind, we can have a replay of that. We can unleash these street thugs and mobs, and we'll force Trump either to nationalize state guards or bring in the Marines, and that'll help us, or he can't do anything and he looks impotent. And 2020 sunk him, and we're going to do this before the midterms, and the chaos will make him look bad. It's not that they're not doing anything. They welcome what's going on. I really believe that.
Well, I read your column about what's going on in New York City and the election of Zohran Mamdani. And I think what's fascinating to me about what you were writing is, like, they have now gone from supporting liberal policies to all out embracing socialism. It's not a fringe part of the party anymore. It is the main nut of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, they're in a revolutionary cycle. It reminds me of the French Revolution. You start out with the monarchy's bad, so we'll have a constitutional monarchy where we'll have a legislative body, but it'll have to defer to the king. And then we're going to have a legislative sovereign body, and then we're going to have an economic, social confiscation movement to confiscate land. Then we're going to go after the clergy. Then we're going to have Robespierre get the guillotine out and kill all the counter-revolutionaries. And then it'll finally get to the point where you can't go any further left, and then you have a counter-revolution. I think that's what's happening right now. They can't get any more left than they are. And when you're killing ICE agents or you're blaming children for their own deaths, or you have campus where they're harassing Jews, it's hard to get much worse. And you're starting to see this counter-revolution. And I think there's a good chance that Trump will either not lose seats in the House midterms, we don't know, it's a long way away, or he actually pick up seats.
I'm with you. I agree.
Yeah.
I think that they are poised, I think, with the record they have and the passage of this bill, to actually pick up seats. And
I believe they will.
Because once again, as we talked about just a minute ago, the experts aren't basing anything on fact. It's just, I looked at a historical trend, and therefore this is my conclusion. Nothing based on an analysis of each of the seats or voter registration, as we like to do on the show. It's just, historically speaking, this is what happens. Well, that's great, but
it's funny. They say he's going to lose the Latino vote. The Latino vote was 54% in the last Rasmussen. It was higher than the so-called white vote. I just went in. I live in a community that's 95% Hispanic, and I turn on the TV and they say the Hispanics are in revolt. I go to the post office today. 6 Mexican American guys come up to me and say, "You've got us. you got to help Trump. You got to help Trump. Trump. Hefe. Trump. If I said to somebody that at Stanford, they think I was crazy. And you ask, you like Trump? Oh, I love Trump. He goes, the illegals, they swarm the dialysis clinic where my mother goes. They have 7 EBT cards I got to pay for. They come in from southern Mexico with M13 and they beat up Mexican American kids that don't speak Spanish. They have a lot of practical, reasonable, logical reasons not to want an open border. But you never hear that from anybody. And there's a lot and they were shocked in the 2024 election because of that. So if I think the only thing they have to worry about is overconfidence and let down their guard. Yeah. And I mean that in every way, because about Trump's health, his safety, these people are capable of anything, and they've got to be very careful and be aware of everything that can happen.
In the column that you wrote on Mamdani, you made a really interesting point that I hadn't thought of before, and it really made me pause and think, and let me just read it for the audience. He said, Mamdani reflects a pattern of affluent, left-wing, and highly educated immigrants from impoverished countries. Barack Obama's father, Kamala Harris's father, Rep. Ilhan Omar's parents fled the poverty, violence, and corruption of their homeland, only to find prosperity, even affluence, amid the safety and the rule of law in the United States. You would think with parents like that, and an upbringing like that you would treasure a capitalistic free society, not embrace socialism.
Yeah, except, I mean, I used to see Kamala Harris's father walk across. He was a Jamaican, and he was a Marxist, professor of Marxist economics. Obama's father was a Marxist, and so was Mamdani's, and so was his mother. And I think part of the thing is these people come from these disadvantaged areas. They get all of this largesse from the U.S. government. Almost all of them came here. Even Ilhan Omar had a scholarship. They come over here and they're lavished, especially because of the nature of contemporary immigration, DEI programs. Oh, you set one foot across the U.S. border, then suddenly you have a claim against the government as a victim of years of oppression. But they size up the cultural landscape and they think, you know what? These people in the elite that run the universities where I'm in, or academia where I'm in, or media where I'm in, or the administrative state or USAID, they want me to be a victim. They want me to trash the United States. They want to give me money. So I'm not going to play any other role than what they want. And then their kids, and there's no civic education, and they never encounter anybody who says to Ilhan Omar or to AOC or to Kamala, you should be ashamed of yourself. Your parents came over here. The U.S. government was so generous. You got special preferences over U.S. citizens. Can't you at least say this was a good country? And can't you at least say, Barack Obama, that you don't have to go on an apology tour, or Kamala Harris, But no, they see it plays dividends in their mind to trash the United States. And it will until people change the dialectic and say, you know what? I don't care what you call me, but you are an ingrate. And that one of the worst traits is ingratitude. And you're full of ungracious ideas. And that's what they are.
Yeah. Your governor there, Gavin Newsom, spent 2 days in South Carolina this week, just randomly. I mean, of course, it just happens to probably be one of the early states in the Democratic nominating process, which I found ironic that, I can't believe with everything that's going on in LA that there's not outcry that you're spending 2 days with no real agenda, just running around South Carolina trying to drum up votes. What is your take? He was talking about how proud he was of California, that they're the toughest anti-Trump state and all this stuff. And I was thinking to myself, do you really want to brag on the state of California these days?
No, he's in big trouble. He has 26% approval rating. And he just started what might be the first 2 cents of what's going to be a 65-cent tax increase on gas. We already have the highest gas. The average gas here is about $4.70. I just filled up today. And we have the highest income taxes in the nation, 13.3. We've got the largest budget deficit. We have about the 5th highest sales tax. We have the highest kilowatt cost. You mentioned they can't rebuild the Palisades. They haven't been giving permits. We've had 3 catastrophic fires. He's still letting water go out to the Delta. We're short water. He hasn't built a dam in 30 years. The freeways are ranked among bottom. The public schools are down in the bottom 10%. So it's a disaster. So what he thinks, the way he squares that circle is he gets he has a flashy look. He does this with his head or neck. He has these gestures. He's glib. And then he gets away from it. He goes to the French Laundry. He goes to a Napa tasting. He has photo ops. He goes and picks up trash down at the Port of LA when they're looting train cars. He goes to South Carolina, but he sides with it, but he never sits down and says, bring in Republicans, Democrats, let's solve this budget issue. Let's solve it. So right during COVID, he said, I'm going to give $500 million to Medi-Cal for illegal aliens health care. And everybody said, well, 40% of California is on Medi-Cal. It used to be 10% 40 years ago. We can't even afford this. You're a racist. And then now that's how he operates. And then when they come and tell him it's broke, you don't have. So then he just quietly says, no more Medi-Cal for illegal aid. Or same with refineries. We're going to get rid of the refinery. We're going to all have EVs. Well, Governor, you had 30 refineries. You're down to about 12 or 10, and 2 of them are leaving. And we only have about 50% of our refining capacity soon. Oh, okay. We need more refineries. That's how he operates. It's just, he's a Nepo baby, and he's never really been out in the real world. And all of his businesses were gifted to him through his father's contact, the Getty fortune. He's a child of privilege, and it shows all the time. Yeah. And he was doing, it was very funny. He did the Charlie Kirk thing. He did the Steve Bannon thing. He had his podcast. He advertised, I'm going to be a Josh Shapiro governor. I'm can-do tactician. And then somebody said, hey, you idiot. That's for the general election. You'll never be nominated in this crazy party being a centrist. You've got to go harder left than Bernie, Elizabeth, and the squad. And once you do that and get the nomination, then you can fake it like you're a centrist. So then all of a sudden, bam, the podcasts are over with right-wing people. Now he's trashing Trump all the time. He's siding with the protesters in the street, the violent ones. And that's what, he's so predictable. And the people caught on to him. And so I don't see much of a career for him.
I love the analysis, though. Victor Davis Hanson, thank you for joining us as always. Our conversations are, I love the insight you bring, and I appreciate your generosity with all your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Appreciate it. All right, great conversation with Victor. Remember, you can always go to my website, SeanSpicer.com, sign up for the latest. I appreciate everyone who's joining us next week. Celino Zito is going to be here to talk about the anniversary of the Butler assassination attempt. And then one of the authors of that brand new book about Biden's decline, he is going to be here as well. You've probably heard about it. It's how 2024, how Trump retook the White House and Democrats lost America, top of the New York Times charts. We're going to have the author with us next week as well. Big week ahead. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday. Thanks for being with us. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.